Thank you all for sticking around for the day. We appreciate it. I think what will be good about this session is for any of you who weren't able to make it into some of the individual sessions where some of the panelists spoke earlier today, you'll get to get a flavor of their views and perspectives on this market as well as our other esteemed guests. And maybe a little bit of preview of their sessions tomorrow as well. But I think this also represents a great time for us to sort of recap some of the things that we've heard, we've seen, we've talked about today, and get your opinions maybe as well as your questions as we talk about what's happening in this marketplace and how we're going to be successful as managed service providers as this world is rapidly changing. So what I'd like to do to begin is allow each of our panelists to spend a couple of moments introducing themselves, assuming that you haven't already heard their introduction in their own individual sessions. I'll ask them to give their name, their company, a little bit of feedback about, a little bit of information about what their company does, maybe even a little bit about how long you've been a Kaseya user, and then we'll get into some more details. So we'll start with Matt, who has this kind of strange accent that you'll decipher, and maybe he has a different point of view as a result as well.
I was going to try and do an American accent while I was up here, Jeff. You're throwing it now. Mathew Dickerson's my name. I've got a company called Access Technology. We're based in Australia, as Jeff alluded to. We're based in a very small regional town in Australia, about 260 miles. I've got to talk miles now because you guys can't understand kilometres. Like, it's not that hard, but anyway. We're about 260 miles inland from Sydney. So we don't have a harbour bridge, we don't have an opera house, but we've got about 40,000 people in our town, so it's very small. So we've got what I call a pretty small company, about 17 employees. And about probably 6 or 7 years ago, we decided that our company was doomed if we continued down the break-fix path. So we really decided that we had to come up with a new business model. So we spent a few years designing a new business model. And so for about the last 2 to 3 years, we've been running a managed services business model. And then about 7 months ago, we finally found the right tool to plug into our business model in Kaseya. So we've only been using Kaseya for about 7 months. We've been using that managed services model for that 2 to 3 years. So that's a snapshot of our company. But if you see me around, now that we're in Vegas, I've seen some of the things in Vegas, and now my moniker is Thunder from Down Under. So if you see me, I'm going to go there tonight and just try out with some of the guys from Thunder from Down Under. You reckon, the body, is it good enough, you reckon? So that's the new moniker now. So if you see me around, just call me Thunder as I walk past, okay? Over to you, Chad.
Chad, it's your turn to try to top that one.
Chad Gifty. We're a level platform. Just kidding. Working in-house IT. I've been there since 1999. We invested in the Kaseya solution back in, I think it went live August of 2004. So we're 2.5. It seems longer than that. I could be wrong. Kevin Carlson from Kaseya would know probably more specifically. But we've been in business for 9 or 10 years, servicing Southern California, not LA or San Diego, just the Orange County area. Currently servicing approximately 140 to 45 companies, and we are strictly a managed services provider.
We're going to talk a little bit about that next as well. Go ahead.
My name is Ted Swanson. I'm the president of IT Solutions. We're a solutions provider just like yourselves in Philadelphia. We've got about 35 employees, been in business since '94. We've been on Kaseya since 2004. I think I was saying to Gerald last night, when we bought Kaseya, there were 4 employees. It was Gerald, Jim, Mark, and Paul. That was it. And now I think they're up to like 85 or 86 employees. So we were one of the first ones to move to it. Is anybody in the room, were you also at the ConnectWise Partner Summit in November? Is anybody? Okay, not too many. I told some jokes then, and I want to know that I can reuse them. Most of the room has not been there. So we had been on a product before Kaseya. I don't want to mention the name. It didn't enable us to really do. That's good. Okay, good. Not many of you were there when I told that joke first. But we were on Enable for a couple of years, and when we found Kaseya, it was like, the light went off, and we said, this is what we were supposed to do. This is what we had been promised. And we've been using it for about 3 years now, and like Matt said, it's just really, the light bulb went off for us, and everything has been different ever since.
Gary.
My name is Gary Pica with Mindshift Technologies. I owned and operated a business called Dynamic Digital Services a few miles in Philadelphia, a few miles from where Ted is. And in July of 2005, we were acquired by Mindshift Technologies. Mindshift is a venture-backed SMB space player, does about 40 million a year, but we're in 4 cities. So I have begun to build a recurring revenue model, first with no tools, and then with a couple tools that weren't getting me there. And getting Kaseya and actually taking a ride out to in-house IT. They were about 6 months ahead of us and already had quite a few customers rolled out. Walked out of that office and said, okay, I think I got it. And since then, our ability not just to support customers, but to acquire new customers has increased at an increasing rate. So it's been all good.
Okay, terrific. So we have a little bit of a background of each of them, some similarities, some differences, a lot of differences in some cases, both in attitude and altitude, I think. But let's start with that in mind by starting with a level platform, if you will, Ted. I had the privilege of interviewing 3 out of the 4 for one of the white papers I wrote for Kaseya. And we talked about some of the trends that are driving managed services. Now, in the session I had today, I tried to paint a big picture about on-demand and all the rest. But from your standpoint, as you're looking at the market today, some of you were early adopters and early entrants into the market and struggled to get it started. What are you seeing today? What's driving the managed services business in your world today? Ted, why don't you start?
I would say right now, we're still probably, I don't think it's quite a mature business yet. I think we're still in, I don't want to say the infancy. It's that period, the early adopters have already gotten in. It's not quite a mature business because I still think there's a very high percentage of our competitors that still have not even turned on to something like Kaseya. There's still a huge market for Kaseya and enabling level platforms and all of them. I don't think the market's quite yet saturated. If you want to look at, I think from what Guy Kawasaki was saying this morning about the next curve is probably the idea of virtualizing our clients' networks so that we're not managing equipment at their premise anymore. We're not managing equipment in their office, that their network equipment will be back in our data center. It's kind of a logical extension. We've taken all of our clients and mashed them all together, and now they're one big company that we manage as a big IT department. Well, the next step, I think, is going to be pulling out all of their servers from their offices and pulling it back into a centralized data center the way a Fortune 500 company would do. And that's maybe a year, 2, 3 away from really getting a lot of kind of traction in the marketplace. But if you start down that road now, you'll be like what we are now, where we're 3 years, 2 or 3 years ahead of where other people were and got in early. Now's the time to get in early on that as well. So I think that's kind of the next, kind of far-reaching trend.
Interesting. Gary, do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, what I would add is that, so you need to have 2 things where this is headed. One, you need to have customers. So now's the time to get it. Mm-hmm. And 2, you need to be able to have margin. Because if you can't invest, to get from where we are to where Ted is talking about, and I agree, with virtualization, I think that's where it's headed. But there's a lot of capital, ongoing capital, to be able to fund that. Margins will come out the other end. So if you're not getting your business model, getting your margins where they should be, you're not going to be able to compete.
Just, are you seeing anything different?
Can you refer to me as Thunder, please?
Mr. Thunder.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Thunder.
Thank you.
What's your view about this?
It looks interesting from what Ted says there. He mentioned Guy's talk this morning, and Guy, that was a great talk this morning that Guy gave. And one of the things that he had was his graph, and of course everything ends up in the top right. But one of the things that Ted mentioned there in terms of what we're delivering in terms of the IT, that the people in this room, the people that have gotten onto Kaseya, have gotten onto managed services, we've got that unique offering. Now, unique not being the only one, obviously, but the very small percentage. And Ted mentioned it there that not many people in the marketplace are offering managed services at the moment. So we've now got that ability to be able to offer that unique opportunity, which then feeds us over into the top right by offering that value to clients. So I think going, in the shorter term, Ted and Gary are talking about going to virtualization. Coming back a little bit from that, what we've got the ability to do is really get out there and say managed services is this whole product range or this whole ability to deliver that other people don't have that. And if I look at my marketplace, there's about 40 computer resellers we compete against. Not one of those 40, apart from us, is offering managed services in the way we're doing it. So we've got that ability. In 2-3 years' time, they'll have started doing that, but we've got to be ahead of them, and then the next thing that comes along, be ahead of it again. So that's, I suppose, everyone that I talk to that uses Kaseya is at that leading edge and has got that ability to get a unique offering in the marketplace.
Good. Chad?
I think the trend the trend is going more towards productivity enhancement. So the managed services offering or the infrastructure management that we're being asked to do for our clients is becoming commoditized in the sense that clients are now expecting us to come in and make efficiency changes. Backups, AV, desktop management, that's given. That's the standard. You have that right, you do that right. I want to cut my employee level down. I want to digitize. I want to go and reach a farther market. So I think the trend is taking companies like ours, and we're becoming more business IT consultants than we are computer repairmen. So
that leads to the next question then. So I hear you talking about the idea of going to virtualization and taking those resources, moving them off-site, hosting them, let's call it. But yet we're still at a point in time where most of the companies that you are trying to sell to are scared about even having you plug into their networks and their IT environments remotely, the whole trust factor. I tend to agree with you. I think they'd like to offload IT and get more functionality out of it. But they're still apprehensive about whether an IT services company can really deliver on that promise, which they've probably heard many times before. What are the customer attitudes that you're seeing, and what are you trying to do to overcome those attitudes to try to spread the gospel of managed services? Anybody want to start with that one? Do you want to start with it? Ted?
From what Chad's saying about business intelligence, that kind of that umbrella that Chad's talking about, he's exactly right. I think what those two trends are kind of going hand in hand about the virtualization and pulling the network out of the client's office, because the client just doesn't want to. There's a point now, I think, where over the next couple of years, the client's just going to see this as a nuisance. They don't want servers. They don't get the benefit of the servers being on their site anymore. I think they just want to get rid of them and focus, like Chad said, on business productivity issues, things like SharePoint, things like e-commercing their website somehow, or live communication server, better communication within their company. Those are the things that the clients want to be dealing with. And when you talk about kind of getting the IT out of their face so that it's not something they deal with every day, physically removing some of that network equipment is kind of falls in line with that. To your point about how they don't necessarily trust that, I think the time to do it is when you're handing them that every 3-year bill for 20 grand to kind of refresh their servers and do that project, and you can say, well, here's a $20,000 bill, or you can pay me $2,000 a month, and you never have to buy another server again, and I'll manage everything, the service, the hardware, the software, the licensing. You're never out of pocket again. I think that's when all of a sudden they'll start trusting you a lot more, I think, at that point. They save themselves a lot of money.
Let's face it, customers don't care about computers. Customers would be happy if they never saw a computer again. What they want is the productivity from a computer. What they really want is the ability to do what a computer does. I often compare it to a car. You don't want to stick your head inside a bonnet and muck around with a car. You want to get in, turn the key, and drive off and not have to worry about it. And that's where most customers are at with your IT. So if you could say to them, hey, let's take your servers off-site, let's take everything off-site we possibly can, but you can be more productive, that's the music to their ears, is productivity is king. So yeah, getting rid of the stuff. You can go in and have a great long 3-hour conversation with a client about some wonderful, really tricky stuff you've done, and the client at the end of it goes, so what's it do for me? Like, they don't care about the technical side of it. And we can get a bit involved sometimes in the technical side when really the customer just wants to be able to turn the key in their car and drive off.
Gary, were you going to say?
I was saying, I think the customers will be ready when we're ready. The same way that they weren't ready to small businesses to outsource IT when it's so accepted today. We're not going to all of a sudden only be a hosting company. What will happen is, as Ted said, you'll have customers, and those customers, as things come up, we're already moving with most of our customers, a lot of them Exchange, where we do hosted Exchange. So bits and pieces, those that have critical apps, they want to move that critical app off-site because for disaster recovery purposes, they want it in a highly available facility. So that's what, and while that's happening, and technology with virtualization and some things with application accelerators enables it to happen less expensively, then those forces together, the customers will be ready when we're ready.
Okay, let's talk in practical terms. And Ted, you touched on this a little bit. to my mind, there's kind of a customer maturity model in all this, right? Is the customer you're dealing with who's scared to death of the technology, but doesn't want to get rid of it because it's tangible, it's there, they understand it, they know when it breaks, someone's going to come and fix it. And they get a little bit more comfortable with the idea of managed services and maybe more comfortable. What is the evolutionary cycle that you see with your clients, and how do you try to push it along? Are there critical moments in the process where they have to change over servers? What usually works? Chad, do you have some thoughts about that? And is it really just an ad hoc process, or are you trying to plot this out and drive your customers in a certain direction? Go for it, Chad.
Chad, you got it. I was half listening to the question.
Yeah, the truth comes out.
You said Ted.
The best way
I
to...
can only say what I guess.
Yeah. So how do you try to drive your clients? Because you actually made a statement, I think, in here somewhere about how you gotta have just managed services customers. You gotta filter out all the rest. How do you move them to managed services?
If you were in my breakout session, I think kind of what point I was trying to get across was you attract that which you are. If you're a break fix company, you're going to attract a lot of break fix clients. If you're an MSP, that's who you're going to attract. I think I find my most successful selling tool or marketing tool is pain. When a client comes to me in pain, they're ready to try anything. And so I think part of that mind shift, or how do you get them, or how do you kind of get over those fears? I think timing is probably key, and that could be an existing client or that could be a new client. So almost take advantage of their pain to show them, in many ways, a new way to do something, and that being kind of an MSP model.
So Chad has a marketing campaign where he fixes all his clients with a virus, and then they feel the pain, and then they realise they've got to do something about it. That's right.
Stranger things have happened in this world. Go ahead, Gary. Since he mentioned mind shift, you might as well follow.
So just to kind of to follow up, I think the business relationship you're able to have with your customers probably is the biggest precursor. If my relationship with the client is that when their computer breaks, I fix it, it's going to be hard to move their stuff and change them and evolve them to an MSP model, to future models. But if you have a business relationship, if you evolve past that, where you're dealing with the right people in the company and they view you as a business consultant as well as a technology consultant, I think once you have that relationship, they'll follow. So I think establishing that, trying to establish that, and have that relationship built into your model as part of what you deliver, and you look at it and you have metrics for it the same way you do for help desk and other portions of delivery, because it's as big as the other parts and as real, I think is key.
How do you build it into your culture, though? Because let's look at the traditional break-fix kind of service company. Most of you really started that way. Mindshift not so much, but maybe the company you had beforehand did. You're not only changing the business model, but you've got to change the sales person, the service person, to look at it in a different way and sell it in a different way, right? What do you do there?
Well, I mean, it is, to use the word from this morning, it is an evolution. We didn't, when we bought Kaseya or Enable the first day, we didn't send a letter out to all our clients and say, effective March 1st, you're all moving to managed services. That would have been suicide. I don't advise that of anybody. I think what Chad was saying in his breakout session, and what I know from the way his company operates, is ultimately they got to a critical mass where they were able to say, okay, you're on the bus or you're under the bus to their clients, and the ones that didn't want to be on the bus, they left, and you were able to survive. But to do that,
we didn't run them over, though.
Yeah, right. You threw them under the bus. The bus ran them over. We didn't do that either. It was really only recently that we sent that letter. So from a nuts and bolts perspective, like what day do you have to wait for? It's been, we rolled out our managed service offering about 3 years ago, and I really just sent the first, with us or against us letter probably about 3 or 4 months ago, where we took the last stragglers, that last 10%, and said, I could afford to lose all 10% of these, every single one, and we'd still be okay. and it would be made up by the ones that actually come over. So really, you're looking at about a 2 or 3 year, maturation in your client base before everyone will be on board. I think and maybe that's accelerating, or it used to be longer or shorter than it was, but it seems to be these things kind of get that level of momentum. And now we don't take any clients that aren't willing to come in at managed services. I think the same thing will happen with this ASP virtualization thing. This is in its absolute infancy right now. Really, there's nobody in our market that I know, maybe 1 or 2 companies that's really doing that on a full scale. So you have time. It will take capital to do. I wouldn't skip the step of implementing Kaseya and doing a normal managed service. I think that's on the path to it. I wouldn't say go right from break fix to virtualization and hosting of all your client servers, but it seems to be about the time it will take. My guess is in 3 years we'll be having a conference about, Kaseya will be doing something where we'll be hosting all of our servers somehow.
I think I've not got a chance to talk to Thunder.
Thank you, Gary. Thank you.
In our conversations, I think what starts it is that each of us, at some point, made a decision that this was going to way our company was going to run, and we let every employee in our company know that was it. This is where we're going. There's no negotiation. There's no turning back. There's no defeat. This is what our company will look like, and this is where we're headed. And here's what it means to our customers. Here's what it means to you, our employees. And you tell them again and again, and eventually people start to carry the flag with you.
And I think you got to. Oh, I'm sorry, China.
No, amen.
I think it's the simpler the better. I mean, you said a couple times in your presentation today about how your product offering needs to be simple, your pricing needs to be simple. It needs to be simple for your employees too. The first 30 people you have to sell on this are the 30 people that work for you. I know that's how it worked with me. Is the engineers saw this coming, and they were kind of looking at it like, okay, well, Ted's going to make the same amount of money or more because we're not going to lower our revenue, and the clients are going to get a better deal, and they may even spend less money. Well, somewhere in there's somebody losing money. The money, it's like energy. It doesn't get created or destroyed. And it is in some ways, you need fewer engineers to do this job than you did before. So you really have to be very careful. It's a delicate subject with the engineers to let them know, listen, we're not going to go and fire anyone. We didn't let anyone go. All we did was grow and not hire the way we would have had to grow 10 years ago when we were growing. So the people that got penalized are the ones that were looking for jobs with us, I suppose. But no one in our office got let go. So you got to get that point across first and sell those employees. Pick a metric, pick some number. Hey, when we get to $100,000 a month in managed services, we're going to take everybody to Las Vegas, or I don't know what it is. You got to pick something, get them energized around it.
I think part of that process too is that when you're talking to your staff and trying to get them on board, the relationship that your staff have with your clients all of a sudden goes up a whole new level. The old days, it used to be, the access guy comes in and, oh yes, something's wrong, quick, we better fix it up. It's a bad relationship that your technicians have with your clients, because the only time they show up on site was when something's broken, so it must be an emergency, it must be bad. Now they're going in for the regular maintenance checks, and going further, Jeff's question to Gary, how do you build it in? We also build in the clients that we have on SLAs. We have a 3-month consultancy visit. Every 3 months we go in. So in terms of building that ongoing relationship, we go in and try and work out better ways to make their whole network, the whole IT more efficient. So you've got network technicians coming in on a regular basis, having discussions in a positive fashion. We're coming in to do a check. It's just, everything's okay. We're just going to check things out. Oh, good, I feel safe. I feel secure in that. I feel like I've got a good relationship. And then every 3 months, a salesperson turns up to do some consultancy work, to give them some advice, and maybe even sell them some stuff along the way there. It sometimes happens. So it's that sort of process that you build a much stronger ongoing relationship. And I think the process, going back to your question from about half an hour ago, I haven't had that chance to talk for the last half an hour. These guys just keep going. So one of the things that I find is that in terms of when clients are ready, clients are relying so much more on their IT now than they were even, say, 5 years ago. You look at a simple retail store. If their IT breaks down 5 years ago, they pull out some little docket book from under the counter and they write a few sales out in that. Now, if their IT breaks down, their stock's going to be out, their account sales are going to be out. They can't survive without it. So they're starting to realise how important it is. In Australia, Helen Coonan is the Minister for Communications, and she made an announcement recently, and and I don't normally talk about this at international audiences because I'm a bit embarrassed about it, but it came a time several months ago that Australians started spending more money on technology than they did on beer. And that's a pretty significant point. Because, you know, our image is thunder, our image is macho, beer-swilling males, and here we are, we're actually a nation of geeks. But it gives you an idea of how far we've come, where now technology is really a part of everyday society. So that's when clients are saying they really want someone just to take care of their whole environment. And more importantly, I think the thing that really hits a raw nerve with our clients is when we talk about capped fees, when we say this is the maximum amount you're going to pay, this is it. For all your IT support for the year, that's it. They think that's fantastic because they always feel like they're putting their hand in their pocket for more IT stuff. They always feel like my hand's in their pocket, and I'm not that way inclined. So, you know, they always feel like I'm trying to take money off them. But just the whole thing about having a fixed fee, they love that concept.
All right, but wait a minute. You guys are selling insurance, basically, right?
Yeah.
It's and peace of mind, yeah. Okay, peace of mind. And I think that was somebody was saying we were selling peace of mind. Now, wait a minute. It's intangible. It's like selling insurance. There's a higher value proposition that many people still don't have insurance. How do you find the right person to sell it? There's a salesperson. How do you convince them to buy it? And how do you prove that they got what they paid for if nothing goes wrong or they don't see anything going wrong? All right?
Well,
So you've gotten away without saying anything other than amen. You're on the hot seat for this one.
Who speaks less is the smartest. I actually had a client 9 months into our managed services agreement, and he called me personally and said, "Hey, we've been paying X dollars for these desktop management thing, and we can't see the value." And so okay, got to think of something. Went on site, gave me a little bit of time, met with he and the controller, and we sat down and basically we discussed, the point we came to is that nothing's gone wrong in the last 9 months on the desktops. All the scripts and automation and things that we were doing to do preventative type maintenance, they basically result in the fact, wow, we haven't really seen any issues, therefore this must be working. So I think, how do you find people who sell that and are incentivized to sell that and it makes sense? I think you need to be excited about it. It's fun for me to walk into a sales presentation because that's what I mostly do every single day, and have a discussion with a client that I know is nothing compared to my competition. I mean, they're not nothing, but completely different. So I'm discussing over here with value proposition and automation and management and accountability and deliverables, where my competition is basically break fix or something along those lines. So I think education of your salespeople in what they're providing compared to the competition is key, as well as just like both of you said, just the staff. We actually had one guy, true story. He was thinking about leaving the organization and actually interviewed at a couple of IT companies and saw how bad it was, and then came back and said, "I'm not leaving." So, and then you fired him.
Now, that little episode, did it teach you a lesson that I hear there, which is a lot of managed service providers do a good job keeping the systems up and running, but don't report on how well they're doing it in a systematic way. So they're not waiting for the phone call to come in from someone and say, "Hey, nothing's happening here. What do I need you for?"
That's been a key component, is sending the reporting out, showing them. We also give access, the IT managers, access to reporting. We tell them to use it so that people see the value from it.
When you get into fixed fee, you're concerned that people are going to eat too much, right? They're going to call you too much. So you want to report to see who the most active customers are. And that's a good report to run to find out what's happening. But a better report to run is to find out who the least active customers are, right? Because we'll never lose a customer for calling us too much. That's only a margin issue, and you can always fix that. The customer depends on you. The customers that aren't utilizing you are the ones you have to be careful of.
Yeah, it's interesting. I spent a lot of time looking at the software as a service space, and what the leading proponents of that space, Salesforce.com in particular, talks about is what a great model it is, because they can actually watch the utilization levels. and they see a fall off in utilization of Salesforce.com, they make a proactive call or push in some other way to find out, first of all, if there's a problem, but secondly, to try to reinvigorate the account before it basically dies on the vine and they abandon it, right?
And the other way to look at it is, just show of hands, does anyone in here not own insurance of some kind? I mean, you have to have it for your car, your house. There's tons of insurance that you buy that never pays off. Health insurance is really the only one that you figure you're going to need because you got to go to the doctor. Ideally, you'd never use your car insurance, and that doesn't mean you're going to cancel it, or your homeowner's insurance, or your renter's insurance. So I think, Gary makes a great point. You can sell anything you believe in. The clients will be ready for this stuff when we're ready for it. If your attitude is, gee, I really think I'm pulling one over on them here, trying to sell them something, and I'm not going to do anything, they're going to see right through that. But at the end of the day, the clients understand that lack of downtime and improved productivity on their network, and the fact that they're not calling you as much as they used to call you in a time of materials, that has some value. There's going to be the odd client here and there, I think it's less than 10%, that's going to look at the number of calls that they placed to you in a month, and then divide that into what they paid you and try and figure out, well, I was better off on the old plan when you billed me time and materials. There will be a couple of kind of wise asses that'll bring you in for that meeting, but for the most part, we have not had that experience. It is few and far between. They know they're paying for that peace of mind, and they're not looking to give it up.
So the ending to it is, between the three of us at least, I don't know how many customers you have, but we had probably 400 customers between us.
Yeah.
It's not really a problem in the real world. It's the exception to the rule, no more than any other issue you deal with customers.
Yeah.
So it's not something I think that people have to be real concerned about.
Twice a year, maybe? I mean, honestly, twice a year I have that, if that, once or twice a year I have that conversation.
I actually had someone call me once and they thought that was the case, but they had actually, their fixed fee, they had spent more, they would have spent more if they would have paid by about $400. And so they, oh, okay, that sounds great, thanks. And they've never called back. So I think, the great thing is maybe in the first few months we do see that. We see kind of maybe a loss, but they tend not to go back and look at that. And at month 8, month 9, we're tweaking our system. We're getting better at the Rubik's Cube. We're doing whatever. And we get better at providing that service, therefore more efficient.
Yeah, since Gary talked about how in the real world this is the way it's working, let's find out how it's working down under, where Thunder lives. Is it an
unreal world?
In the unreal world where you come from, I know there are not even 400 companies where you are, since you're so far out in the sticks. How do you cobble together a business where you are, and what kind of attitudes are you seeing as far as this stuff is concerned?
What's a company? Yeah, look, it's something that, exactly the same conversation I was going to relay, exactly the same conversation that Chad had. We're same conversation after about 6 or 7 months into a contract. The client called me in for a conversation and went through that exact same process. And when I started talking about why they hadn't called so much, and the clients started rattling off themselves, oh yes, we had that lovely young boy, Sean was in last month for that maintenance check, and before him that Douglas came along and did that. And as the client was talking, she actually stopped and went, do you think those maintenance checks, do you think that's why we're not calling you as often? And the penny dropped, and then she realised that productivity was king. So yeah, similar experiences. It really doesn't matter where you go in the world. I've had conversations with people in London, in Amsterdam, in the US, in Australia, in New Zealand, and all the conversations that we have are all along the same lines. And there's an actually statistic, and I don't know I'm using bad language, but I'll use it here once. There's 1.7% of the world, officially, according to marketing stats, are dickheads. And that's an official stat. So people are always worried about how much people are going to chew up those all-you-can-eat. Oh, I'm so worried if I'm going to give them a fixed price, they're going to keep ringing all day. They don't have time to ring all day. There's 1.7%, and when Ted talked about 10%, it's not even that. It's 1.7%, and you can easily eject 1.7% of your clients. That's very easy to do.
That's true, and you know what?
Sorry, it might be higher in America, I think. Is that right?
That client.
It might be 10%, Ted.
It's coming from a country whose slogan is "Now with electricity."
When do we get that?
So, you start to kind of cherry pick your clients also after a while too. I mean, yes, you want to go out like Chad did and try and save that client. I mean, if it was a client you had for a long time, you don't want to give away any client, but if that client is calling you every single month saying, hey, I only called you 4 times and you charged me $1,500, after a while, is this a client you really need? Do you need to have every client? You had a great slide, a thing on your slide. Not all money is the same money, or something like that. You know, not every dollar is worth the same. It's not. You know, there's plenty of companies that leave them to your competitors, leave them to somebody else. Let them chew up their resources for a while and call them every 30 days about why the bill's too high. It's just, after a while, you can't save them all.
And the funny thing is that the biggest competitor, I found anyway, has been ourselves. Because we've been in business for 18 years, we've got clients that we've had for 18 years. And when we started introducing the new services, the easy sell was people that had been looked after by other IT providers, heard about this great, they didn't call it managed services, they didn't know what it was, but this whole thing where you can just get a fixed fee, they'll ring up and that's fantastic, let's jump on this program. The harder sell were the clients that we'd had for a long time that said, well, we're pretty happy with the service we've had for the last 18 years. Why do we want to change? So that's one of the things internally that you've got to be careful of. And so what you do there is give really bad service to those people, and then you start to change them over to fixed services. But no, you go through that process, and you slowly start to change them over. And I think that 2 to 3 year time frame that Ted mentioned before is probably not a bad time frame. If you're really brave, you draw a line in the sand and say, today, that's it. But I think the sensible thing to do without annoying too many people in the process is to have that transition where you really just keep pushing the message and people start to get on board. I had one guy that said to me, it was actually a win due to Kaseya, who said to me, look, I've known you since we went to school together, I've been dealing with you forever, and this whole SLA thing, that's just your retirement fund. You want to retire by the time you're 40 and that's it. You're just going to set this up and that's it, you're going to be right. So when hell freezes over, that's when I'll be signing an SLA. And so we kept doing his work for about a year or so, and finally one day I was talking to him and I said, I think your network's getting a bit unpatched. I've noticed a few errors there. How about I put this little Kaseya thing on and told him a brief thing on it, and I said, I'll let it do some patching and I'll let you actually have a look at the information yourself and set up, you know, just a machine group just for him. And when I had a look at that, the first day I put that on there were 82 patches required on his server and 78 required on all his workstations, about 20 workstations. So I showed him that, left it on there for about a week, rang him in a week, he actually had a look in there, I sent him a report through that had it down to 1 or 2 patches per machine, and he sent an email and said, well, I guess hell froze over, we better sign up one of these SLA things. So, you keep sticking away there. If I would have drawn a line in the sand, I would have lost him, but we kept dealing with him in a break-fix environment, kept giving him worse service than he had before, but you keep them on board and eventually you just keep plugging the message away. About 10 contacts, the marketing people say it takes before someone finally believes what you're saying. So you keep just plugging the message out there and eventually they go, hey, this doesn't sound like such a bad thing after all. So, it's a slow process.
Gary, you want to?
Yeah, I think a lot of the issues and potential issues we're talking about, they all have the same answer: scale, right? So if you can bring on 2, 3 new customers, paying you monthly, every month, we're an insurance company, right? So as we grow our base of insurees, we have to worry less and less about these potential problems. And 99% of them don't really come to fruition, and those that do, we're able to sell through them, and we'll add more companies, and we can make decisions. It's hard to fire. If you've not added a new managed service customer in 3 months, it's very hard to fire one. Yeah. Okay? If you're adding them every month, you can afford to make the right decisions. So your focus becomes, to the point where you'll only sell that. And that's really where we've all gotten. If you're not paying us monthly, we're not the right guys for you. Right. There's other people that do the old model better than we do. So I think scale.
Yeah. And I know of companies, I'm not advising this, but I know of companies that do what we do that have gotten to a certain revenue level and are happy with it. They're bigger companies, maybe they're doing $1 million a month, and every time they bring a new client on, they make sure to fire someone of equal value. I'm not kidding, because they always know that the bottom 10% of their client base is dragging them down in some way. And if they keep bringing new clients in at the top end, they can take the ones out at the bottom end that are calling too much, or that are kind of being rude, or they're mean to their people, or they don't pay their bills on time. Not every client is a client that you absolutely have to hold on to, with your IT. When you're not in a recurring revenue model, there's almost no way to make that argument, because you don't know who the next client to call you for time and materials work is going to be. You've got to keep everybody. Recurring revenue is a little bit more reliable. You can afford to look at that client that's calling to complain constantly about the price and just say, you know what, it's just not a good fit.
You get rid of the ones down under.
Yeah, the ones down under, exactly, yeah.
All right. Now, I know that Dan and Kaseya would like to keep this to the 5 o'clock timeline that we established. So I'm going to ask the panelists one more question. I apologize, we don't have time for questions from the audience unless, I see Dan's got his microphone there. That's the way we want to do, right? All right, so these guys are going to be around. You can talk to them over drinks, and you'll have plenty of time to even hear them talk again tomorrow, except for our man down under who's going to be auditioning down the strip someplace, I think. But I'm going to ask the final question here, and I'm going to turn around the typical wrap-up question, which is, okay, what are the steps for success? I'm going to ask it in a different way. We're going to do a confessional, kind of like what Guy did this morning, okay? Tell us one stupid thing you did that gave you a lesson learned that you think the rest of this audience would appreciate as you move to managed services, okay? So one thing. Got one?
Just before I do that, can I just first of all get a show of hands? Just a show of hands. Put your hand up, show of hands. Okay, good, thanks. So, yeah. Now don't forget, advertisement, 1 o'clock tomorrow, Acacia Room, the best talk you'll hear in this whole conference is on. Acacia Room, put it in your diary. The stupid thing I did was waited so damn long. The thing that got me was that it probably 6 or 7 years ago, we saw that this wasn't the way to go forward. The way that we were doing the break-fix model, and I wasn't calling it break-fix then, but the way we were doing it, one of the things that I had great delight in throwing out when we finally changed over was every Monday morning we have a staff meeting, a team meeting, and we always used to have little pillows. We put them on the ground, and we'd all kneel down and we'd start praying that someone's server broke down today so we could make some money. If that didn't happen, then what were we going to do all day? We're going to sit around and just not make any money. So it took so long to get to that stage where we finally changed over, and it took years. I mean, I spent probably 3 years designing a model, and listening to guys talk this morning, we should have rolled it out at the very beginning and then worked out what it was that we rolled out. So that's the one silly thing I did. I wish I would have done it 3 years earlier or even earlier than that, because now I think we've got a good model and I think we're progressing very well in the marketplace and we're ahead of the curve in terms of where we are, but it would have been great to have done that 3 years earlier. So if you're delaying, if you're procrastinating in any way, shape or form, just do it, just start tomorrow.
Good. Chad?
Where we really fell on our face and actually lost a couple of clients was we were overselling. So here we found this new managed amazing tool that could do anything. It enabled us to do a lot of things, and basically we said, well, we'll know when things go down before you do. We'll call you on Sunday. We'll call you in the middle of the night. We've got a touch on your network at all times, and we were really overselling, and we had one server that went down and we weren't notified. We had another one that it was a false positive and it wasn't down, and we notified the client. And what we did was we kind of bit off more than we could chew, and we lost a couple relationships from just a we know everything type mentality. And it was unfortunate, but it was a great learning experience at the same time. So
it's great.
The biggest mistake we made, Gerald would like this, is we bought Enable before we bought Kaseya. That was one of the biggest things, the mistake we made. At a time when, and here's the difference. This, I'll kind of tie it back into the actual topic. When we were sold Enable, we were told to go out and then resell Enable basically to our clients. That monitoring on its own at $99 a server or whatever it was, we were supposed to take that model and just kind of be a reseller for them to resell agents into our client base, and that we were going to get revenue out of that somehow. And that model was a disaster for us. And I don't know that it really ever worked for anybody except for Enable. They sold a lot of licenses. Well, what I like about Kaseya, and kind of how we've grown up with it now, is that we don't sell Kaseya to our customers. None of our customers have any idea what Kaseya is. They never see it. We changed the little icon on the taskbar, so it's our logo. It's a piece of the overall picture. And so I think the stupid thing we did was think that one vendor, one product was going to be a managed service platform. It isn't. You need a product to sell to your clients that is all-encompassing and has lots of different layers and facets to it. And a piece of that, how you get your job done, is with Kaseya. Or whatever tool you want to use, but with Kaseya. And that the client never really, the client doesn't care about that. So that's what we did, though, I thought. I wish we had done it different. Turned out all right.
Ted took my point.
Did you buy Enable too?
He did the exact same thing.
So did he. So I think the Enable server makes a great Kaseya server, by the way.
so one of the, I guess, so you stumble across things, you realize, I think, the realization that most of the issues that held back my company, that kept us from having the right product or at the right price, they were all perceived. They were all me. Most of them weren't really the marketplace or the competition. And starting, one, to have an understanding of that, and two, start to have confidence in being able to put things out there and make changes. And again, not judging it based on what my customers or my employees told me, but new prospects that we would meet, because they're a much better judge. Because my customers always think anything else is too much money, if we're doing a good job and they're happy. So I think just a realization that most of the obstacles that hold us back are ours.
Terrific. All right. So let's give these guys a round of applause. I think they did a great job.